Hello class, this is a video recording of our laboratory demonstration in your Module 6 of your Analytical Chemistry Laboratory, having your standardization of hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. Before we head on to our main discussion and laboratory experimentation proper, here are some of the few reminders. Number 1, when working in a laboratory, you have to wear your PPE properly at all times. And number 2, observe and practice the laboratory safety precautions. For the standardization of your hydrochloric acid, the first step is to number 1, weigh 0.5 grams of your anhydrous sodium carbonate that has been heated at 270 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. Step number 2 is to dissolve the sodium carbonate in 80 ml of distilled water and shake until solution is complete. Remember to dissolve it properly and mix the solution gently because it generates heat. The preparation of our hydrochloric acid solution. Next is to pour 100 ml of distilled water into a 500 ml volumetric flask. Next is to pipette 21 ml of your chemically pure hydrochloric acid. Remember to do this step in a fume hood or in a biosafety cabinet. And always take note that always add your acid to water and never the reverse. And lastly, add enough water to complete the 500 ml stock solution. Moving on to our actual titration part, you can observe in our titration setup yung mga apparatus natin like iron stand, burette clamp, and burette. Another thing to take note is the stopcock because it controls the flow of the fluid in the burette. If the stopcock is positioned horizontally, ibig sabihin H nakahiga, it will stop the flow or naka-close siya. Meanwhile, kapag ka naman naka-vertical, it will allow the liquid solutions to flow, ibig sabihin naka-open siya. Our burette has a 1 to 40 graduation being 0 on top, so our titrant must be placed on the 0 mark. Next, using your funnel, transfer a distilled water, run down, and then discard. Using your funnel, transfer your hydrochloric acid solution into the burette, list down and do your initial reading. Next is to add 2 drops of your methyl orange, titrate with your hydrochloric acid to a salmon pink endpoint. Please take note that during your titration, all the liquid coming from your burette or your titrant must be placed inside the flask. Wala dapat tatalsik or walang tatapon. And also, be gentle on swirling para ma-avoid natin yung pagtalsik or your spillage. And lastly, when the endpoint has reached and there has been an observed change in the color, you have to do your final reading and determine the normality of your solution. Next, for the preparation of our sodium hydroxide solution, we have to number 1, weigh 10 grams of your sodium hydroxide pellets. Next is to add the distilled water to dissolve your sodium hydroxide solution. Remember to dissolve it properly and mix the solution gently because it generates heat. Next step is to pour the sodium hydroxide solution into a 500 ml volumetric flask. Add distilled water to the beaker and transfer quantitatively the contents into the volumetric flask. And add enough distilled water to complete your 500 ml. Next, for the standardization of our sodium hydroxide, using your funnel, transfer distilled water from the beaker, run down, and then discard. Next, transfer your sodium hydroxide solution into the burette. Next is to add 2 drops of your phenolphthalein. Did you know that your phenolphthalein, formerly widely used as a laxative and was withdrawn from the market because of concerns about possible links with cancer? But the small amount used as an indicator solution is not ingested and is no cause for concern. Titrate your sodium hydroxide to a light pink color endpoint. Remember to swirl gently. And lastly, when the endpoint has reached, you have to take note of your final reading. List down the data that has been observed and then compute for the normality of your solution.